I wrote about Blue Origin.
Yeah.
It's one of the companies that you're involved with.
Yes.
And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Great.
The Blue Origin.
Be fun.
So before I did this story, you told me you wanted me to watch something, like an old TV show. Can we get the slide?
I gave him homework.
Yes, I had some homework. Will you see this? It was tell me about this. Why did you ask me to watch this TV show?
This is an incredible short video that I would recommend all of you go, find on the internet and watch. This was recently rediscovered. It is a guy named Jerry O'Neill, Isaac Asimov, the famous science fiction author, and this. For me, Jerry was very formative in my high school years. I read his book called The High Frontier, and it resonated with me. It made a lot of sense to me. And he was the first person to ask this very fundamental question. The interviewer asks Isaac Asimov why he thinks it is that nobody had come up with this idea before. Because there had been lots of ideas and science fiction stories about settling other planets, but never these giant space colonies. By the way, don't think International Space Station. These space colonies would hold 1 million+ people. They're very large. They have rivers and farmland and so on. And Isaac Asimov answers. He says, yeah, I think I know why nobody has thought of this before. It's because we're planetary chauvinists. And I believe we are. It makes sense. We kind of grew up on one.
So that has been something that you've been, I think it's fair to say, obsessed with since high school. Can we see a picture? At one point you went to space camp.
Yeah.
And can you find Jeff in here? Let's watch the circle here.
Look for hair.
There he is.
and that's my physics teacher, Deanna Rule, just beneath me and a little to the right.
So, your physics. Yeah, your physics teacher who accompanied you gave me that.
This was not really a space camp. This was the Space Shuttle Student Involvement Project. And we created experiments. I was a finalist in that competition. It was a nationwide competition. This is at Marshall Space Flight Center. I wanted to send common household flies into space and see what effect it had on their little tiny fly muscles. But anyway, I was a finalist, but not a...
than the Earth could possibly sustain will be in outer space. That's your mission, isn't it?
That's the mission. I won't be alive to see the fulfillment of that long-term mission. What we have to do is we have to decide, are we willing to live in a world of stasis, or do we want to continue the energy that we use per capita, continue to increase the population of humanity? And I like the non-stasis view of the future. I think it's way better for our grandchildren's grandchildren if they can continue to use more energy than we do. If you take current baseline energy usage on Earth and compound it at just a few percent a year for just a few hundred years, you have to cover the entire surface of the Earth and solar cells. Such is the power of compounding. Now, of course, that won't happen. Other things will happen, and we are starting to bump up against the absolute true fact that Earth is finite. And the Earth is so small. If you look at the output from the sun and think about what a tiny fraction of the solar energy that the Earth intercepts, it's a tiny little piece. And so what's going to happen over the long term, we'll have 1 trillion humans in the solar system, and then you'll have 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts. It'll be a much better civilization for Blue's role in this, Blue Origin, what we need to do is lower the cost of access to space. So what the analogy I use is the dynamism that I have seen over the last 20 years. Incredible things have happened in really short periods of time. Amazon was a garage startup. Now it's a very large company. Two kids in a dorm room built Facebook, in less than 2 decades. It's a $500 billion market cap company. Two kids in a dorm room cannot build an important space company today. The price of admission is too high. So what Blue Origin is working on doing is lowering the price of admission so that the next generation, there can be some, Mark Zuckerbergs of space, where some kid in their dorm room comes up with a brilliant idea and actually does that. Because that's the only way we get to the future that I'm talking about, is we need thousands of companies. We need the same dynamism in space that we've seen online over the last 20 years. And we can do that. We need reusable space vehicles.
So you're spending about $1 billion of your money every year.
Yes. I always say yes. Yeah. I'm like the worst.
You're doing pretty well at Amazon, very well. I think you're the richest guy on the planet, this planet. And some people say, well, maybe it shouldn't be the richest people to take their visions, even something a problem there. But still, address that bigger issue of should it be individuals who are lucky enough and have worked hard and can come up with innovative ideas like you have to be able to take on the giant problems of humanity and decide, hey, space rather than poverty.
We want both. And so what you want is you want individuals to be able to pursue things that they think are important, and you want government governments to pursue things that are important because they optimize for different things. Governments they tend to have to be quite conservative. Mm-hmm. They aren't, when you're playing with taxpayer money, governments have to optimize. They're often optimizing for not being embarrassed. It's tiny compared to the resources of the U.S. federal government. Tiny. I'm talking to Mike Bloomberg. Not too long ago, and he said that some hedge fund guys came to him and said, good news, we're going to fix the New York public school system for you. We've come together and we've raised $1 billion. Mm-hmm. And he said, do you know what the annual budget of the New York City school public system is? He said, it's $22 billion a year. Mm-hmm. That's just New York City. So some of these things sometimes they don't have the scale of things right. The federal government is gigantic. And there are lots of ways to do that. I'm very proud of the work that the Washington Post is doing. I think they're contributing to society. I'm very proud of the work that Amazon is doing in empowering people with AWS and a bunch of other tools and retail, saving people time and money. That is contributing to society. Blue Origin is the most important thing I'm working on, but I won't live to see it all rolled out. But you want people to be doing things. You want risk taking. You want people to have vision that most people don't agree with. If you're but in a unique way, all of the real needle movers are driven by being right when most of the world is wrong.
Now, part of my research here, I went to Texas, to West Texas.
Yeah, that was a fun trip.
It was a fun trip, and and I watched a rocket launch. About what Blue Origin is doing. Can we cue up the first video? This is the launch that I was able to witness. Why don't you tell us a little bit of what's going on here when we get this rolling?
Okay, this is the most recent flight of Blue Origin. This is a very important test because the vehicle has an escape motor in the crew capsule in case something goes wrong with the booster. In different flight regimes and try to make sure that it works. And this was a high altitude escape, which is one of the more stressing cases, and it went beautifully. It's the last of the important escape tests. It looks like CGI, but that's a real video of the vehicle landing on its tail under rocket power.
And that is so mind-blowing to see a rocket come down to Earth, and you think it's got to be going
on the tip of your finger. One of the reasons that we chose vertical landing as our architecture is that it scales really well. Just like with an inverted pendulum, it gets easier the bigger the pendulum gets. Pencil on the tip of your finger. It's actually very difficult to do because you need such high response time. But as you get to a broomstick, it's actually pretty easy to balance a broomstick on the end of your finger. So the bigger the vehicle gets, the easier vertical landing gets. It scales very nicely.
Now, when we saw the capsule land, what wasn't shown in that video was what the capsule landed on.
The horned toad?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. That was remarkable. And he hopped away.
Yeah,
that's like a very lucky toad.
Yeah, it's just some toad sitting there basking in the desert, and
we lifted the capsule up with a crane, and there was this toad right under it.
Now, that spaceship, New Shepard, is going to take humans into space, and they're not going to be professionals, but paid customers.
That's right. It's a tourism mission.
And when is that going to happen?
I'm hopeful that will happen, in 2019. I was hopeful it would happen in 2018. So I keep telling the team it's not a race. Yeah. I want this to be the safest space vehicle.
But there's no Blue Origin employees in there. There's no flight attendants. I'm going to go out into space without anyone to, tell me maybe it's time to sit down in your chair and stop bouncing around.
That's right. No, there are 6 seats, and they're all going to be for paying astronauts, and there will be no Blue Origin employee on the flight.
I love you call them astronauts because you say they're going to have maybe like a day or two of training.
Yeah, they'll have a day or two of training. I'm pushing for a day. I don't think you need 2 days of training for this, but it may be 2 days of training. And people say they will be astronauts if you get above the Kármán line, which is 100 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. You do earn your astronaut wings, and Alan Shepard was the first American to do that. He went on a suborbital flight many decades ago now, and that's the offer we're going to make to people. And they say that seeing the thin limb of the Earth's atmosphere and seeing Earth from that perspective really changes you. They call it the overview effect.
It seems a shortcut, but. So that's step 1 is New Shepard, and step 2 is New Glenn, and we have a video of that. So tell me about this.
Yeah, I'll tell you about this. So this is CGI. We're building New Glenn right now. It'll fly in 2021. It's about from a thrust point of view, it's about half the size of a Saturn V. Has 6 landing gear, so we have landing gear out capability. That's a little built-in test. Fins to fly itself back to the landing ship. It's powered by liquefied natural gas as the fuel and liquid oxygen as the oxidizer. So that's why the flame is a little bit is blue. And it's the booster stage, 3.85 million pounds of thrust, is completely reusable and designed to be reusable in an operable way. Very little downtime between flights, very little refurbishment. Reusability is the absolute key. And it has to be real operational reusability, not the way the space shuttle was. They brought the space shuttle back, and it was only reusable in the narrowest of senses. Here it comes under. This is about to land on the landing ship, and the landing ship is stabilized and underway while this landing occurs, so that it can use fin stabilizers to stabilize the deck. We want to be able to operate in heavy sea states to increase reliability. And then this is the payload deployment, second stage. This first version, the second stage, will be expendable.
So this is the workhorse of going to be for decades.
Yeah,
you know,
this is
to come.
About a $2.5 billion development project, and it's going to be used for all missions you can imagine.
Right, including the moon.
Including the moon. We're in the process of building a lunar lander right now that will land more than 5 metric tons of cargo on the surface of the moon.
Now, you just got a big government contract.
Yeah, with the Air Force.
To do it in the Air Force. And that includes defense work.
Yeah.
And that's been a controversial area. Some companies, Google, has, had, under pressure from its own employees, decided not to go into that kind of work. And they even gave up on a contract that AWS is competing with, the JEDI contract there. So tell me about your philosophy of there. What do you think about high-tech companies using the most advanced private technology to do work for the DoD?
We are going to continue to support the DoD, and I think we should. It doesn't make any sense to me. Sometimes one of the jobs of a senior leadership team is to make the right decision, even when it's unpopular. And if big tech companies are going to turn their back on the U.S. Department of Defense, this country is going to be in trouble.
So, it's full speed.
I like this country.
Even your own
this country is. I know everybody's very conflicted about the current politics in this country and so on. This country is a gem, and it is amazing. It's still the best place in the world. It's the place where people want to come. There aren't other countries where everybody's trying to get in. I'd let them in if it were up to me. I like them. I want all of them in. But this is a great country, and it does need to be defended.
Now, you're not the only private space company. There's another one, and we took along the launch pad there. And I know you wanted, I think your first choice of a launch pad in Florida was the one where the Apollo mission went to the moon there. But you didn't get that. There was another company run by another billionaire that was got it there. What's the relationship between Blue Origin and SpaceX and some of these other private companies?
Well, there really isn't much of a relationship between the two companies. We're competitors. My view on this is a big industry with room for lots of winners. And if we're going to achieve for humanity what I want to achieve, it is going to be thousands of companies, just like what you see on the internet. And so we need lots of successful companies helping out with this. Sports is a bad analogy for business, and so I encourage everybody. I know a lot of the people in this room are entrepreneurs and venture capitalists and so on. Sports is a very damaging metaphor for business because when you enter a sports arena, there's always a winner and a loser. But in business, usually industries rise and fall. And so it's just not the same. There really can be multiple winners, and there often are. I don't like winner-take-all industries because your odds of winning in a winner-take-all industry is low. You want an industry where there can be a number of winners.
Also, when we went to Texas there, you showed me something else you're building there, not too far from the launch site, the 10,000-year clock, which I've been following for a long time. I wrote a story about it in Newsweek almost 20 years ago, and people mocked me saying that thing will never be built, and you've embraced the project.
You're welcome.
And built it. Now, why that? Why invest in
So
something that lasts for 10,000 years? You say you're not going to be around for space, to live
No.
in one of those million
Even the
person
United
colonies.
States won't be around for 10,000 years. No nation state has ever lasted. Civilizations will rise and fall. There's no 10,000 years is such a long period of time. The point of the 10,000-year clock, it's invented by this brilliant guy named Danny Hillis, who I know you know. He invented this idea way back in the 1980s, and but had to wait for somebody to be crazy enough to build it. But I believe powerfully in symbols, and they do change thinking. And the simple fact of the matter is that we have become so powerful as a species that we can no longer afford to think short term, and we do. We have never needed to think long term as a species, and we finally do. And so we need more symbols for long-term thinking. And I believe the clock will accomplish nothing for a few hundred years. So we'll build it, and then people will make fun of it for a long time. And then once it's old, people will be like, because we honor old things. And so it'll be like, wow, that's a weird old thing. And it'll still be ticking, and they'll be like, why did they build this thing? And because they wanted us to think about the long-term future, and maybe we should do that. So it's got a very slow burn.
So, well, let me ask you something about what's burning now. Can come down from space for a little and ask a question about big tech and the problems it's having right now. When Wired started 25 years ago, we were super optimistic about what technology would do, and it happened. It did change the world, and from commenting on something at the periphery, it's at the center. But now we're finding that there's a lot of consequences that aren't so great, and companies like yours are getting more scrutiny. You talk about how you love competition, but some people feel it's not competitive enough, and they need regulation. Tell me how you're viewing this, difficult moment for technology as running one of the major, most powerful companies, not Blue Origin yet, but Amazon, in negotiating this time period.
Well, I guess first of all, I remain incredibly optimistic about technology. The reason that we have, pulled ourselves up as a species out by our bootstraps is because we have continued to make technological progress, and technologies always are two-sided. There are ways they can be misused as well as used, and this isn't new. The book was invented, and people could write really evil books and lead bad revolutions with them, and create fascist empires with books, and so on and so on. Doesn't mean the book is bad. So there is, and I feel that society develops an immune response eventually to the bad uses of new technology, but it takes time. I see that right now. I think social media is increasing, unfortunately, identity politics, tribalism. I think the internet in its current incarnation is a confirmation bias machine. If you have a going-in point of view and you go do some searches, you find confirmation of your point of view. If your news feed is showing you things, it's showing you things that confirm your point of view, by and large. And so, having a technology that increases confirmation bias probably isn't good. It is going to lead to more tribalism. And so we don't know the solutions to these problems yet, but we'll figure them out. I worry that some of these technologies will be very useful for autocratic regimes to enforce their will, and a bunch of things are going to happen that we aren't going to like that come out of technology. But that's not new. That's always been the case, and we will figure it out. The last thing we'd ever want to do is stop the progress of new technologies, even when they are dual use. What biotech is going to be amazing, and it's going to save your children, and it's going to cure your cancer and many other things, but it's going to have dual use too, and all of that is going to happen. As far as the broader question about tech companies, including Amazon, I think all large institutions should be scrutinized. It makes sense to me. I think governments should be scrutinized. Government agencies should be scrutinized. Big nonprofits should be scrutinized. Large companies should be inspected and examined and scrutinized. It's normal. I've been at Amazon the whole time. I was there, when it was just me, and it's a garage. It was a garage startup. I love garage startups. I was one, but there are certain things that only large companies can do. You're not going to build a Boeing 787 in your garage. You're not going to build an iPhone in your garage, and so we want large companies, but we do also want to scrutinize them, and I preach inside Amazon. I said, this is going to happen. It's normal. Don't take it personally. It should happen. You want to live in a society where that happens. And what should you do about it? Just make sure that you're conducting yourself in such a way that when you're scrutinized, you pass with flying colors.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. It was great.
Thank you, guys.